At 44, after 20 years of what I thought was a solid marriage, my entire world came crashing down. The man I had trusted with my life, Daniel, my husband and the father of our 2 children, betrayed me in the most humiliating way. He wasn't just unfaithful, he was living a lie, carrying on an affair with his secretary, a woman young enough to be our daughter. The truth didn't just creep in, it slammed into me like a freight train. An anonymous message with photos landed in my inbox, showing them together at a luxury resort. It was a cruel twist of fate because that day should have been our 20th wedding anniversary. For years, I sacrificed everything to support Daniel, standing by him through thick and thin while he built his business empire. I gave up my career, my ambitions, and at times, my own identity to be the glue holding our family together. And this is how he repaid me? With deception, humiliation, and indifference. When I confronted him, hoping for an ounce of remorse, all I got was a cold, dismissive shrug as if 2 decades of love and loyalty meant nothing to him. That moment was when I knew the man I married no longer existed. Or maybe he never did and I was just too blind to see it. The fallout was unbearable. Friends whispered, neighbors gossiped, and I felt the sharp sting of betrayal not just from him, but from a life I had so naively built. Filing for divorce felt like signing a death certificate for the life I had spent 20 years building. But even as the grief consumed me, there was a flicker of something else, a determination to rise from the ashes of his betrayal and reclaim the life I deserved. If Daniel's betrayal shattered my heart, Mia's decision to side with him crushed my very soul. My daughter, my firstborn, the child I had poured every ounce of love and sacrifice into raising, didn't just turn away from me, she embraced the very woman who had torn our family apart. Mia was only 18, but she spoke with a cold conviction that made her feel like a stranger. "You're just bitter, Mom," she told me one evening, her voice dripping with disdain. "Dad's happy now and Alicia makes him happy. You should just move on." Move on? How could I, when everything I had built was being dismantled piece by piece? Seeing Mia with Alicia laughing, bonding, treating her like some kind of second mother was a pain I couldn't even put into words. It felt like losing her twice, first to her father's lies and then to his mistress. Alicia, with her calculated charm and sweet facade, had somehow convinced my daughter that she was the victim in all of this, that I was the bitter, angry woman clinging to a marriage that should have ended long ago. I wanted to scream, to shake Mia, to make her see the truth. But every attempt to bridge the gap only pushed her further away. Daniel, of course, encouraged it. He flaunted their newfound closeness, using Mia as both a weapon and a shield. "She's old enough to decide for herself," he'd say smugly, as if her rejection of me was some kind of victory for him. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now echoed with silence and tension. I fought so hard for my family, but now it felt like I was losing not just my marriage, but my daughter too. And the worst part? I had no idea how to get her back. I refused to give up on Mia, even as the walls between us grew higher and colder. I texted her every day, desperate for a response. "How are you, sweetheart? Can we have lunch this week? I miss you." Each message went unanswered, leaving me to stare at the silence, my heart sinking deeper with every passing day. I even tried calling, but she always declined. Once, I waited outside her college campus for hours, hoping to catch her between classes. When she finally saw me, she barely stopped walking. "I'm busy, Mom," she said, her tongue clipped, her eyes avoiding mine. Then she was gone, leaving me standing in the cold with nothing but tears for company. But nothing could have prepared me for the dagger she thrust into my heart next. Late one night, as I scrolled aimlessly through social media, I froze. There on Mia's profile was a photo of her and Alicia, arms around each other, smiling like they were best friends. The caption read, "So grateful for my second mom." "Love you, Alicia." My stomach dropped. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped my phone. Second mom? No, she hadn't called her that. But the words were there, glaring back at me in stark, unforgiving black and white. The comments were even worse. People were praising Alicia for stepping up and being there for Mia, as if I had abandoned my own child. One even wrote, "Mia's so lucky to have such a strong bond with you." Lucky? She had stolen my husband, and now she was stealing my daughter. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand how Mia could betray me like this. But all I could do was sit there, staring at the screen, feeling the last fragile pieces of my world crumble to dust. The betrayal burned like acid in my veins. Each thought of Mia's smiling face beside Alicia twisting the knife deeper. I had poured everything into raising her, sacrificing my dreams and working endless hours to ensure she would have a bright future. I built that college fund brick by brick, skipping vacations, ignoring my own needs, just so she could have every opportunity I never had. And now, she had the audacity to spit in my face, to embrace the very woman who had shattered our family. The pain was unbearable, but the anger was louder. One sleepless night, as I stared at the spreadsheet of Mia's untouched college fund, an idea crept into my mind. Why should I keep sacrificing for someone who didn't care about me? Someone who not only turned her back on me, but paraded her loyalty to the enemy? My ex-husband and Alicia had already taken so much from me, my marriage, my dignity, my peace. And now Mia had aligned herself with them, choosing to humiliate me publicly. Enough was enough. I decided right then and there that I wasn't going to let them bleed me dry anymore. That money was meant for someone who valued my efforts, who valued me. If Mia had chosen her side, then fine, I would choose myself for once. The next morning, I called my real estate agent and began the search for a new home, a sanctuary where I could rebuild my life. I dipped into the college fund without hesitation, each dollar I spent feeling like a reclamation of my power. If Mia wanted to be part of Elisa's life so badly, she could ask Elisa to fund her dreams now. As for me, I was finally done being the martyr. It was time to put myself first. The moment Jonathan and Mia found out about my decision, chaos erupted. Jonathan, ever the manipulative hypocrite, called me in a fury, his voice laced with condescension and barely masked outrage. "How dare you take that money, her money, and spend it on yourself?" He spat, as though I hadn't spent 2 decades giving up everything for our family while he indulged himself with Alicia. His words didn't sting anymore. They only fueled the fire inside me. Mia, on the other hand, took a different approach, one that was almost harder to bear. She stood in the doorway of my new, half-furnished home, her eyes filled with disbelief and, worse, betrayal. "How could you, Mom?" she said, her voice trembling. This was for my future. "You've ruined everything." For a fleeting moment, guilt tugged at my chest. This was my daughter, my little girl, the child I once thought would stand by me through anything. But as I looked at her, I saw Alicia's influence in her eyes, her posture, her words. The Mia I had raised would have never abandoned me like this. "I didn't ruin anything," I replied, my voice steady but cold. "You made your choice when you chose to support Alicia. Now, I'm making mine. If your father and Alicia are so perfect, maybe they can figure out how to pay for your future." Their protests grew louder, more desperate, but I stood firm. I had no room left in my heart for guilt, not when I was finally reclaiming the life I had sacrificed for a family that didn't value me. As I closed the door on their pleas, I felt a bittersweet sense of relief. I wasn't their doormat anymore. I wasn't their victim. I was finally free. Mia showed up at my doorstep one rainy evening, her face streaked with tears, her once confident demeanor shattered. "Mom," she sobbed, clutching her hands together like a child desperate for comfort. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please forgive me." Her voice cracked, each word heavy with regret, but I stood frozen, staring at the daughter I barely recognized anymore. The sight of her crying should have stirred my maternal instincts, should have made me rush to embrace her and tell her everything would be okay. But I couldn't. The betrayal had cut too deep. "Why now, Mia?" I asked, my voice sharp and trembling. "Why only after everything has been taken from me?" After you paraded Alicia around as if she were your mother, after you dismissed me like I was nothing, her tears fell harder, and she dropped to her knees as if the weight of her guilt had become too much to bear. I didn't know what I was doing, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I thought I was being strong, but I didn't see how much I was hurting you. I was angry, confused. Dad, he made it all seem like you were the problem. Hearing those words, my chest tightened with a mix of pain and anger. Jonathan's manipulation had poisoned her, and she had let it happen. Do you have any idea how alone I felt, Mia? I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts to stay composed. You were the one thing I thought I could count on, and you threw me away like everyone else. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. The betrayal was still too fresh, too raw. I need time, I said quietly, shutting the door to her sobs. Time to heal from the wounds her choices had carved into my heart. Several days after her tearful apology, Mia returned, her eyes carrying the weight of an unspoken confession. There's something I need to tell you, she began hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. I gestured for her to sit, bracing myself for what might come next. The air between us was fragile, as though the wrong word could shatter it entirely. She clasped her hands tightly, avoiding my gaze. I didn't choose Alicia over you because I loved her or even liked her, she admitted, her words trembling with shame. I did it because Dad promised me things I thought I needed. My heart sank as she continued, her voice cracking. He said if I got along with Alicia and stayed on their side, they'd buy me a car and help me with rent for an apartment when I started college. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. My daughter, my Mia, had betrayed me not out of malice, but for material gain. So it was all for a car and some money? I asked, my voice thick with disbelief. She flinched, her face crumpling as tears began to fall again. I know how terrible it sounds, Mom, but I was scared. I thought I had to pick a side, and they made it seem like they were the ones who could give me what I needed to start my life. The room felt suffocating as her words sank in. Anger and heartbreak warred within me. I wanted to scream at her for being so easily manipulated, but I also wanted to hold her to protect her from the toxic game Jonathan and Alicia had played. You sold our relationship for their promises, I said, my voice hollow. And now you want me to understand? Mia's sobs grew louder, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. The damage was already done, and I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. The days after Mia's confession were unbearable. The silence between us was suffocating, and though she continued to try to reach out, I couldn't bring myself to respond. My heart was in pieces, and every attempt from her to bridge the gap only made the chasm between us feel wider. She had betrayed me in the most painful way, and I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. Then, one evening, as I was sitting in the dim light of the living room, a notification from my laptop caught my eye. It was an email from Mia. My hands trembled as I opened it, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and hope. The words on the screen were simple but heavy. Mom, I know I've hurt you more than I can ever explain. I've been selfish, and I made choices that I thought would give me security but only tore us apart. I realize now that nothing can replace the love we had, and I'm so sorry for everything. I want to make things right. Before I go to college, I hope we can find a way to heal. Please, let's try. I miss you. I stared at the screen, my breath caught in my chest. The apology was raw, vulnerable, a stark contrast to the confident, calculated young woman who had once chosen her father's side. Tears welled up in my eyes as I read her words over and over again. Mia had finally acknowledged the damage she had done, and for the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope ignited in my heart. But was it enough? Could I really forgive her? As I sat there, uncertain of the answer, one thing was clear. The path to healing for both of us had only just begun. The decision to forgive Mia was not an easy one. The wounds she had caused were still fresh, raw, and the bitterness in my heart lingered, refusing to let go. How could I possibly overlook the betrayal? The way she had sided with her father and Alicia, the woman who had torn apart our family. The pain of losing not just my husband, but my daughter as well was almost unbearable. Yet, in the depths of my soul, the one truth that couldn't be ignored was my love for her. She was my child, the little girl I had held in my arms all those years ago, the girl whose laughter used to fill our home with joy. After reading Mia's heartfelt apology, I found myself torn between the hurt and the undeniable yearning to heal the fractured bond between us. As a mother, I couldn't allow my anger to blind me forever. Slowly, the realization dawned on me. If I didn't choose forgiveness, I might lose her for good. The thought of never having her in my life, of never sharing a conversation, a moment of warmth again, was a reality I couldn't bear. So, despite the lingering pain, I decided to give her another chance. I sent her a message telling her that I was willing to try. Our journey toward rebuilding our relationship was awkward at first, filled with moments of silence and hesitation. But as time passed, the walls began to crumble. We talked, we cried, and for the first time in a long while, we began to laugh together again. It was slow, but we were finding our way back. And though the scars of the past would never fully disappear, I knew that for us both, forgiveness was the first step toward healing. In the end, despite the deep scars left by betrayal, both from my ex-husband and my daughter, I began to rebuild my life. The divorce had shattered me, but it also liberated me in ways I hadn't imagined. I learned to stand strong, to trust myself again, and to focus on my own happiness. The road to healing wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Mia and I, though scarred, were finding a way to reconnect. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The future remained uncertain, but I knew that moving forward, I would never again allow anyone to break me.